This episode of The Candid Frame is sponsored by the Charcoal Book Club. The Charcoal Book Club is a monthly subscription service for photo book enthusiasts. Working with the most respected names in contemporary photography, Charcoal selects and delivers essential photo books to a worldwide community of collectors. Each month, members receive a signed first edition monograph and an exclusive print to add to their collections. Join the club by visiting charcoalbookclub.com and use the promo code TheCandidFrame at checkout and receive a 10% discount on your first membership payment. We also have the support of LensRentals.com, the largest online camera rental house in the U.S. They carry the most popular brands and models of cameras and lenses, but also anything you need for video, lighting, post-processing accessories, and more. Whether you need something for a one-time assignment or want to test it out before you buy, LensRentals.com is there to help. Explore their extensive inventory and save 10% on your first order when you sign up for their newsletter at lensrentals.com/newsletter. The possession of a camera can be a powerful thing. Whether it's a high-end mirrorless or a smartphone, the camera has the potential of being a tool for storytelling, social justice, or personal creativity. Its power doesn't reside with its cost or its feature set, but how the photographer chooses to use it. Laylah Amatullah Barrayn uses it to serve her work as a documentary photographer, examining issues of race, religion, and various facets of the Black experience, both in the U.S. and Africa. Laylah recognizes and respects the power and the legacy of photography, which led her to serve as the co-author of Women Photographers of the African Diaspora, the first anthology in nearly 30 years that highlights photography produced by women of African descent. Along with photographers Andre Wagner, Valeria Rocha, and James Anthony, Valerie was also part of the Adobe-sponsored collaborative project, Life Reflected. We welcome the chance to share her voice and her vision with you this week. This is Ibarionex, X, and welcome back to The Candid Frame. Welcome to the show. It's a real pleasure to have you and have a chance to talk about you and your work. You just mentioned that you got back from Minneapolis. So were you on assignment? Was this something that you were doing self-assigned?
Well, yes, I was on assignment. In between the work I was doing on my assignment, I was taking some time to get to know the residents of the city, getting to know the city itself, just really following my curiosities about where I was, which is important to me as a storyteller.
Was that because you're expanding beyond the sort of the immediate narrative of the trial from a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah, I think it was very important. The coverage of the trial was obviously very important. This trial was one of the most important trials in, I would say the past, 25 years, especially with regards to social justice, race relations, police relations, and, all of these things and issues that greatly affect Black people, African Americans. So, there's always a greater story outside of the immediate coverage. Of course, we want to know what's happening day to day with the trial, with the prosecution and defense. Those things are important. But then this trial lives within a context of a person, George Floyd, of a city, Minneapolis and St. Paul, the Twin Cities. There's a history there. I was interested in that. I was interested in learning as much as I could while I was there in that short amount of time, so that when I'm delivering my work, I can have an extra set of information to share, with my editors. And I was also on assignment for a story on environmental justice too, which I was very appreciative of. And this is a topic that I don't cover as much, so I was really excited to delve into new territory. It was an investigative piece. It should be coming out soon. So I was really excited about that. It felt like it really fortified my experience when I was in Minneapolis.
That's good to hear. When the Rodney King trial happened and the resulting uprising in Los Angeles happened, one of the things that I was often disheartened about was that once the dramatic events of the things that were happening in the streets were over, a lot of the journalists and photographers that had come down there didn't return to tell much larger narratives in terms of the things that sort of led up not only to those specific events, but what had been happening in the community for a long time.
Yeah.
And one of the great things that I'm seeing now, especially amongst photographers of color, is that there is a real commitment and passion to tell those stories and get them out there, and that they feel significantly empowered, not just about the ability to create the photographs, but to be able to create dialogues about it, not just among themselves as Black photographers, but also the greater community. Mm-hmm. Is that something that you feel has been happening and is happening?
Well, in terms of feeling empowered to document ourselves, in America, and in terms of feeling empowered to documenting the current and breaking news as it relates to our experience in this country, I do see that. I love seeing that. And I like that we have access now to be able to do that and share those narratives and share the greater narratives as you would, quite elegantly put it. I do see that. What I'm more interested in seeing, so what I'm interested in seeing more of is having the structure, the journalistic structure, the editors, the ecosystem of where we work support that, because yes, we are out there making photographs, we are investigating, we are telling the broader story, the broader narratives. Are the editors then picking up those stories and sharing it in the news outlets? Because I think that's important. Are the curators now curating exhibitions with so much of the work in the past that has basically done the same thing? And are they engaging the photographers who are documenting what's happening now as well? So I think, there needs to be a balance too with all of the work that's being created, the photographs that are being made. They need to be supported and placed in a platform and shared and disseminated. So that's what I'd like to see more of.
Oh, yeah, that's a great point, because I know that for Black journalists during the 60s, the 70s, and especially during the events in the early 90s, that was one of the frustrations that they had, was having to contend with a narrative that a largely white editorship was invested in and who are not open to an alternative way of seeing it and telling the stories. And that's a problem. Is, you can have a lot of photographers of color out there, but if the editorial staff and the editing staff of the magazine isn't in line with being open to that, then that's a really big wall to have to surmount. Do you find in your experience that there is an openness to those kinds of points of view?
I feel like it's getting better. I've had a lot of my stories turned down, and I've had some picked up, sure, which I'm happy about, because I'm always looking to present another point of view. I'm looking to present a greater, broader narrative, and maybe some stories that may have gone under the radar. I'm always looking to do that. So when an editor picks that up, I'm like, yes, you get it. You understand the progression that needs to be had with journalism, storytelling, breaking news, and all of the stories that are surrounding that. But when my stories are turned down, it's disappointing. It's disappointing because, of course, you feel very passionate about this thing that you have encountered, and now you want to go work on it and report on it, and then work with a brilliant editor to have you shape it up and then present it to the world, and then have the readers engage with it. You want all of that to happen, because that moves society forward. It expands perspectives. You want that to happen. When it doesn't happen, of course, naturally you are disappointed. However, when my stories are turned down, I still go forward with them. I don't let one no or rejection or we don't see the point or whatever stop me, because, at heart, at my core, I'm a storyteller, I'm a documentary photographer and a journalist. So, I go forward with it. I still pursue the story. It then becomes a personal project, which I feel, that personal projects really get to the heart of the story, because you are then pursuing something on your own terms, on your own time. You're getting to the heart of it. I think that this is the reason why I really love personal projects, because of
Yeah, and I think that's why I'm a big proponent of it, and I think it's so important because it relieves you of that sort of mindset that you have to get permission in order to do something.
Exactly.
And I think that it's very important as a photographer or any sort of creative to go, even if someone else doesn't want to pay me for it or believe in it or support it, I'm going to do it anyway because I need to do it. I have to do it.
Right. And the word, sorry, the word permission, the word permission is the word I was looking for. This is a thing that holds us back. Permission, green light. Does this editor or curator see our vision or not? But first, we have to see the vision. First, we have to understand that it doesn't just lie. The decision and the validation doesn't just lie in one's person ability to see it or inability to see it.
I was listening to someone on Clubhouse, and someone was saying something along the lines of, until you believe completely in what you are doing, wholeheartedly with every part of your being, you're going to have a hard time convincing someone else of the importance of it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't think yourself into that kind of state of mind. You got to go out there and actually put in the blood and sweat to make it happen.
Yeah.
Because that just demonstrates your own investment into your work and into yourself.
Yeah.
Which is, I think.
I definitely agree with that. On the other side of that, I remember when I was younger and having some ideas, but having perhaps a person further along in their career point something out to me and say, look at this. This is interesting. This is brilliant. I think that you should pursue this. And that also inspired me and had a light bulb go off in my head to say, yeah, this is. So it's important. I guess that speaks to mentorship and community and having good people around you that are able to do that too. Because I've believed in most of my projects wholeheartedly, but then there were some projects where there was that person that I looked up to, or that person that had the wisdom and the generosity to say, okay, wow, you have something good on your hands. You may have to follow that. And I did. Yeah. And I've always been glad that I've done that.
The idea of having that mentorship and having that sort of feedback coming from someone you admire is so important, especially coming from people who have similar experiences, not just as creatives, but as a person of color, I have found to be invaluable. Not to say that there are people who have other ethnicities or any cultures do not have something valuable to offer, but I have found that it's one of the good things about it is not having to do the explaining, not having to do the justification for it, which is always like a big hurdle when you have to sort of precede your discussion of the work by getting someone on the same page.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But talk to me about, on the same topic of mentorship, about a moment early on in your career in which you got that kind of feedback and that it really helped you to gain a greater sense of confidence about what you were doing. Because early on, we can be doing all these things. We may not feel we know exactly what the hell we're doing, right? We know we like doing it and we think it's working, but tell me about an early project or some feedback that you got from a mentor early on that helped to sort of really instill that sense of, oh, I'm going in the right direction.
Yeah. One moment that comes to mind is about when I was in my 20s. I had done quite a bit of documenting daily life in Senegal, West Africa. I came back to New York City and I had this body of work that, I would share with people from time to time. This was before Instagram. So I had a physical book of photographs that I would bring along with me wherever, out and about, art galleries, different gatherings where I knew artists would be or my friends would be, and I would share them. Dr. Deborah Willis, I remember one time she was putting together a book. And the book was called Black, A Celebration of a Culture. And it was an anthology of celebrating Blackness through visual, through photographs, celebrating, having a visual celebration of Black culture around the world. And so I showed her my portfolio that I had put together myself. I had printed the work myself. And so, in your 20s, I was just starting out. So these images weren't the way my images would look now or the way I would have a portfolio look now. But she sat down, she looked through it and gave me feedback and used some of the work in her book. And that was the first time I was published in a book. I think I was about 24 years old.
Wow.
The book was published jointly by the Smithsonian and Hylas Publishing. And I had my work in a book with, you name it, Gordon Parks, Bruce Davidson, Carrie Mae Weems, some of my contemporaries, Delphine Fawundu, Jules Allen, Terrence Jennings, and I'm naming a lot of men, but, so many people. Ife Tayo. I mean, there's so many photographers in that book. It's a huge book. It's pretty.
It's on my shelf.
It's on your shelf, so about this book. And if someone, if the listeners don't have it, I suggest you all pick it up because it's a beautiful book. My work was in that tome, contributing to the story of Black visual culture, Black pride, Black history, Black beauty, Black cultural expression. And I had to work in there. And that was extremely, what's the word? I was I was happy, but I was very much empowered. And I felt like I can do this. I can have my work be part of these types of conversations with people who have established themselves and who have basically gone to expert status in storytelling. I can be part of this. And so that was one of the moments where I felt empowered, and I felt, someone like Dr. Deborah Willis looking at my work and seeing the value in it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me, it felt like, I'm part of the dialogue. It wasn't so much about my ranking as like, I'm not as good as Gordon Parks or Roy DeCarava or Carrie Mae Weems, but I'm in the orbit, I'm being included, and that was incredibly satisfying. Mm-hmm. You grew up in Brooklyn.
I did.
One of the interesting things about your work and for your story is the fact that you grew up with an early awareness of the diversity of Blackness. Because I think when most people think about African Americans, it seems like a sort of a very narrow story, but there's the kind of Blackness that's experienced in this country, and especially in a city like New York, with its wealth of immigrants from Africa, from South America, Central America, that you got to be aware that there's a great diversity to that story of what it means to be Black, and that has informed so much about what you do. And I would love to hear about those years growing up in Brooklyn and how that experience has really shaped who you are as a person and as a photographer.
It's interesting. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. For the past year, I haven't been able to travel internationally, which is a thing that I've done most of my adulthood. I've gone abroad. Growing up where I grew up, in particular, my family was probably one of the only few Black American, African American families on my block. Everyone else was from Jamaica, Panama, Trinidad, Nigeria, Guyana, all of the Caribbean islands, a few people from Guinea, Ghana, and, Senegalese people not too far away. this is how I interacted with my community. I always felt that I was part of a global Black diaspora community, just naturally, because that's what I saw. That's what I saw. And my grandmother, her best friend, was from Trinidad, and they would sit on a porch together and talk and exchange recipes. And my grandmother was a Southern woman, but she would make many recipes, that many dishes from the Caribbean. And, that's because, this is where we were situated. The music, I remember one time, the song Reasons by Earth, Wind and Fire. I believe I heard the reggae version first, and I thought that was the original version. And so when I heard the Earth, Wind and Fire version, I was like, wow, what are these guys doing? Like, what are they doing? So that's what it was. I grew up around a lot of reggae, a lot of calypso, lots of soca. And I love that. I really appreciate it. I didn't kind of think about these things until I grew up. And I was just like, wow, that was a really interesting experience to experience the Black diaspora basically on my block and in my neighborhood. And, being Muslim too, in the mosque, I've interacted with many people from West Africa because that's just what the community was like. And so naturally, when I grew up and I was able to travel, the first place, as the Pan-African kid, as this, young woman who, thought of herself as part of this global Black diaspora, I went to the African continent. I went to Senegal. And then from there, I went to as many countries on the African continent as I could, in Morocco, Egypt, South Africa, Nigeria, Ethiopia. I mean, I just kept on going back. I engaged in the Black diaspora in Europe, always in France, Paris, London, just looking everywhere, visiting the Caribbean, becoming curious then about what was it like to be Black in the Middle East. So then looking toward Oman, visiting Abu Dhabi and Dubai. But since being on lockdown for the year, I couldn't do any of those things. So I traveled around this country quite a bit in 2000 and up to now, and realizing that there is a amazing diversity of Blackness in the United States regionally. A Southern Black culture, a Midwestern Black culture, a West Coast Black culture, So I'm really fascinated by that. I'm interested in that. And even when the world opens back up, I want to go to Tulsa. I want to go back to Minneapolis. I want to go back to Detroit. I want to go back to Miami. Spend some time in Houston and New Orleans. I've been to these places, but now I'm looking at them with a different eye. I almost feel like I missed out a little bit. So that's what I'm doing now. I guess I'm kind of seeking to complete my understanding of Blackness, and looking home.
What are you saying that you missed out on exactly?
When growing up in New York, it was about the Caribbean community, the African community, the immigrant community that I lived among. But I didn't engage so much with my Southern roots when I grew up. Okay. I went to the African continent. But now I'm very interested in going back to South Carolina, which I have been to South Carolina. But I guess being down there, I was just with my family, kicking it with my cousins and these types of things. But now I'd like to really engage and see and learn more about the culture from which I'm from, Southern. And then also, going to places like Detroit, like I mentioned, these are ultra Black places. These are like, and New Orleans. I've been to New Orleans many times, but I now want to go and kind of sit there.
Yeah.
I want to. Yeah, that
you don't
kind of
want
thing.
to just visit the place. You want to be there.
I want to be there and check out the Black scene, so to speak. Yeah.
I think you have a wonderful advantage in that so early in life, you got to visit the continent and experience these Black cultures at a time that really was very impressionable, and seeing not only how different it was, but how similar it was. And
Yeah.
I can't help but think that you probably have gained a really valuable insight so that when you do go back to South Carolina and you do go back to Detroit and you go back to New Orleans, that you'll have a keener eye than someone who had never left.
Mm.
Do you think so?
I feel like that's such a wonderful compliment. I think so. I hope so. I accept that and embrace that for sure. Absolutely.
Because in
Absolutely.
1976, I think I was in middle school, and our family took a trip to Dominican Republic for the first time because my parents had both immigrated there from the 50s, and we did this big trip where we visited my mom's hometown, my dad's hometown, and went to Santo Domingo. And it was the first time I had been outside of the country, and I got to see the extreme range. At first, we stayed in Santo Domingo at this luxurious hotel to the point, and then later on, we were in my dad's campo, his small village, where electricity and water was being rationed, and you got to see the whole range in terms of wealth and poverty. And when I came back, I couldn't see my world in the same way, and I was only there for probably 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But it was such a valuable experience to have that I remember at some part in the trip we went back to the hotel. I think it was like a week or two. It was towards the tail end, and I couldn't stand it. There was just something about, I didn't care about the fact that it had swimming pools and 24-hour water and power. There was something genuine that I'd experienced when I went down to the small towns and I had the opportunity to engage with people one-to-one, not just with, the staff, that I loved. And
Yeah.
it was just so valuable to me. So I get, that's why I say what I say about what you've had the opportunity to do in Senegal and elsewhere, that
Yeah.
my gut just tells me that that's going to inform so much of what you've done and probably are going to be doing into the future.
I agree.
Tell me about, exactly when photography started becoming your voice.
It's interesting. I always talk about my mother and how she basically created our family archive, the way she made the photographs of our relatives, very skillfully and intentionally making actual portraits of my relatives, and many of them have passed away. And she also, unfortunately, has passed away. So there was something in that I saw. There was something powerful that I saw, and the way she moved, I paid attention to that. There was some urgency to make those photographs. And so I paid attention to that, but then I kind of put it in my back pocket because I was just like, I'm going to take that. There's my mother again with the Kodak Instamatic and, with the camera that she always had film in. When you're younger, it's just kind of like these are just the things that happen when you have company over. But when I got a little bit older and, I had my sister came, I have a younger sister, and my sister wasn't able to meet many of those folks in the photographs because they had passed away. But, the photographs were there, the portraits were there, and the stories were there alongside. And I was able to share some of those stories. So was my mother and my grandmother about our relatives. And those photographs really informed a very strong identity on who I was and who she was and who we were. Pictures of our grandparents and our parents and all of our cousins who didn't necessarily live around us, but we knew who we were and we knew that we came from a huge family and a long, strong lineage, particularly from South Carolina, the Low Country, and Port Island, which is one of the Gullah Geechee Islands on the coast. I think that was the start of it. I had another, there are other moments that I noticed where I felt very drawn to photographs. Looking when I was younger, I would look at Jack Mitchell's book on the Alvinelli Dance Company. And this came out in the 90s, but he had photographs all the way from the beginning. So he was able to tell the story from the very beginning of Alvinelli's dance company, when it was, a very small idea to a huge international dance company. And I looked at that book from over and over again and saw the story and saw the growth of the different dancers and the characters and Allie and the documentation of his intellectual and cultural work. That was very powerful to me. Another thing was, of course, looking at the Black magazines that we had in our homes, Essence, Ebony, and even some of the other entertainment magazines like Right On. And then in the
Oh
90s,
man, you're taking me back.
yeah. And then, in the 90s came magazines like Vibe and The Source, and these images were always really, smartly done to complement the very smartly written pieces. So I started to put those things together, and actually I wanted to write first, and that's what I did. I was pursuing a career in writing. I would read writers like Karen Good, Michael Gonzalez, Torre, and they would speak about a culture that was currently living at a time with such grace and such intelligence, and I really loved it. And I was like, wow, that's a really interesting way to see hip hop culture and urban culture at the moment. So that's what I wanted to do. But then I was very much taken aback by the portraits that were made by of the stars at the time, so, it's all of those things. I always talk about my first assignment, which was the Million Woman March. Of course, this is in 1997, no social media. So I went down there, I made photographs. And for my friends and family who weren't able to go, I was the person who came back with the photographs. And I came back with the story, and I relayed the story. And it was almost like, I felt very powerful. Not almost. I felt very powerful, and I saw the responsibility in relating a story, in documenting a story and relating a story, visually. I think I would say that. And of course, going to being in West Africa, being in Senegal, making photographs, engaging with people and asking many questions, so that even when I came back with my photographs from Senegal, I had a lot of information to accompany the pictures that I made. I could talk about them for days and days, the context, the time, the people, the why I took the photograph and the where. I think that I mentioned a lot of things. Did I answer your question?
Oh yeah, you gave me. I love that.
Yeah.
I love when people just get deep into it. I just have to lay back. You make my job easy. You did a book, Women Photographers of the African Diaspora.
Yeah.
Which I fortunately didn't get a copy of. I'm still on the hunt for one. But
okay.
It brought to mind this idea of the importance of not just gathering a tome like that showcases the work of such talented women from all parts of the world, but the idea of the importance of a young girl seeing the content of that book and seeing herself in it, and seeing that a career like that is possible. And who was that for you early on? Did you learn, or did you actually get to meet someone who you felt you saw yourself in terms of a photographic career?
Wow. Living in New York was very good to my younger self, because, this is the media capital. We have all of the magazines were here. You had the institutions like NYU and Dr. Deborah Willis. You had a lot of photographers living in New York City, and they were accessible. They would be at openings, panel discussions, conferences, and you can go up to them and engage. I think that was a great thing for me, and I'm always thankful for that. I had an incredible photographic community here. When I was younger, I met photographers like Lori Lyons, who, is an unsung heroine of mine. She made many photo editorial work for Essence magazine. She was a writer too. She did an essay in one of Jamel Shabazz's books. And an incredible photographer and storyteller. Technically, she knew all of the, lighting, studio work, etc. And she was someone who I met very early on. And I saw that, wow, you can be a Black woman, brown-skinned girl with braids and be a master photographer. I would say the same thing for Dr. Deborah Willis, a scholar, in Black photographers, who holds that history, who felt compelled and felt it necessary and saw the importance to dig into our history in photography, because we've been engaging with the medium since day one. And Dr. Deb was someone who was accessible to me, always around, generous, even to this day, to offer advice, to support in any kind of way. And she was also somebody who I was very much inspired by. And I saw myself in her, like, oh, wow, I can be a scholar in photography. I can talk about photographs and in this very deep and expansive and intellectual way. I would also have to say, my best friend, Delphine Fawundu, she has been making photographs, since the 1990s, documenting hip hop culture in the 1990s. And we became friends in the early 2000s. She's a master printer, knows her way through the darkroom like it's nothing. And I saw myself in her. We lived close by, became friends. We, did this photography thing together, explored a lot of things together through our friendship, and ultimately made this book, that we were trying to make for 10 years, even before it came out. And I would have to say that this book, I must say that this book was, of course, inspired by Viewfinders, which is a Black woman, Viewfinders, which is a book by Jeannie Mutusumi Ash. And Viewfinders came out in 1986. It's a book about Black women photographers. So, I feel like that I can go on, but I think, those three are good mentions that propelled my photography interest and curiosity in my 20s.
When I held the monograph, Echoes Shades by Pierre Torzaberski, I knew I was in for something special. Distributed through the Charcoal Book Club, this book immediately establishes itself as unique just by its cover design. The rough material that's used for its cover and the recessed lettering provides a tactile experience that's unlike most of the books that are out there. When I turned the pages, I was greeted with striking black and white imagery that documents ceremonies and daily rituals that examine the connection between nature and culture. The results are really one of a kind. If you're satisfied with looking at the same kinds of photographs over and over again on Instagram, that's great. But if you want to discover how amazing photography can be, sign up for the Charcoal Book Club today. These special first edition books showcase the best in contemporary photography. And if you don't like that month's release, you can choose another of their titles of similar value. But if you're like me, you're not going to do that. They offer free shipping to the US, Canada, and the UK. It's subsidized elsewhere. Visit their website to see what they've offered in the past and what you have to look forward to. Join the club at charcoalbookclub.com today. And remember to use the code TheCandidFrame at checkout to receive a 10% discount on your first membership payment. And it must have been an amazing experience compiling the book when you got to sort of see the wealth of photographic history that was out there and to have it consolidated like that.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering what it was like for you to sort of have that greater awareness of probably of people you might not have heard of who was doing work that, that may have been very different from you or that you hadn't heard of, and what that did in terms of your appreciation and your understanding of the contributions of, of Black women photographers.
Yeah. And, the interesting thing about travel is that I knew that there were Black women photographers, African diasporic photographers who were women doing this work. Like, we knew that, we know that we are out there, just because the magazines and the museums aren't supporting us and showing our work and hiring us, that doesn't mean we're out there. And I think that was a huge myth, that there are no Black women photographers, there are no African women photographers, and there were, because I encountered them. Delphine, who's my co-author, we encountered them, and we knew that we were part of a brilliant cohort of women photographers that were making work in the 2000s, which is when we first started the book, 2004. And we couldn't get anyone to publish that book. We had some brilliant Black women photographers in that book, couldn't get anyone to publish it. So we shelved it. And then we picked it back up in 2016. And so we were like, we're not going to go around and get that permission. We're going to do it ourselves, because everyone was self-publishing at the time. It had become a thing. Yeah, you can self-publish and it's still legit. Let's do it. And by then we were like, we know people internationally that are creating brilliant works, who are making these brilliant visual narratives. Let's reach out to them and make the book. And we did. And it was incredible to have the support. So many photographers supported us and were excited about the book. We put it together in 10 months, and it came out in the world, and was able to share it with so many people and institutions, and it sold out immediately. And we look forward to reprinting it. This year is our 5th year.
Oh, good.
Anniversary of the book. Yeah, we look forward to reprinting that, and hopefully adding some new folks and some new voices, some new essays to the book to contextualize and talk about our work. So yeah, I look forward to that as well.
I'm saving space on my shelf for it. I won't miss it. I won't miss it the second time. What are the challenges about being photographers? It's always been a challenge, but in terms of just the hustle, the business side of it. And
the business. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's talk about that, because I think that I know that learning how to take a good picture is the easier part. It's the other part. That's a challenge. So what's been invaluable to you in terms of being able to negotiate that part of it so that it is what you do for a living?
Yeah, I think, that is a huge part that can be very tricky. Money, contracts, pricing, all of these things, if you don't have access to it, to this information, you probably won't even get a job where you need to, bid for it. You know what I mean? So, that's been an aspect of it. I feel like Black photographers have been locked out for a while. Last year was a huge year for us. We were being hired at a we started to get hired, basically.
Yeah.
And then we started to encounter these contracts and these terms, that we needed to, many of us, including myself, needed to seek counsel for, or to seek advice for, because the dollar figures were getting longer, and the terms were getting longer, and the deliverables were, were looking a bit more complex,
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that, needless to say, that if you've been making work on one level, which is fine, and haven't had access to that other level where you had to have that business savvy, that has that's been tricky. It's been tricky for myself and for a lot of photographers that I've been speaking to for the past year. Fortunately, there have been photographers who have taken it upon themselves to create support systems like Diversified Photo and organizations like that, where you can go to and seek advice on how to price your work, or have someone look over your contract, because sometimes, especially when you're making photographs for a larger paper or a larger company, television company, or things like that. Sometimes if you're not careful, you can give away the rights, your copyright to your photograph. And, that has happened, unfortunately, but fortunately, there are organizations out there actually created by us, for us, so that we can create our work. We can still be creative and still make money and be smart about it.
Yeah, because we've been through this many times before.
Yes.
Yeah, but also in terms of the events that happened in Watts and in LA back in '92, it was like, we need people who look like them to go down and shoot.
Right.
because our normal staff is too scared to go down there, right?
Right.
And so it would create an opportunity, and there would be an upswell of jobs for photographers, but making that sustainable over the subsequent years has always been sort of a challenge. Yes, it opened doors for some, but not enough, you
Right.
know.
Right. Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that Diversified Photo and other organizations like that, I think, are really invaluable in terms of getting people savvy about not just that one assignment or that one licensing
Yeah.
of that one particular picture to go. You're
Yeah.
getting your foot in the door, but it can get slammed back on you real quick if you're not careful.
Very, very true. Very, very true. One of the more lighter things that I've engaged with recently was the Life Reflected campaign with Adobe. So
Mm-hmm.
big companies are creating these really dynamic and fun campaigns that are engaging photographers. So that's something I did for the past 3 weeks, and I was able to create these prompts and share these prompts and have people share their work through the prompts. For example, growth reflected, if you have pictures that are exploring growth, share them with the hashtag, and then love reflected, friendship reflected. So I think kind of pulling photographers in that way and expanding the community that way was really fun to me, and it's important too. And I think that creating community also creates knowledge and gives people the opportunity to engage and ask questions and learn and grow.
But tell me about the relationship with Adobe in terms of because you get access to a huge audience as a result of that, and you get an opportunity to connect to people who really share a similar passion in terms of being creative.
Yeah.
Tell me about the collaboration with that, and what's that been like for you to not only receive the benefits of having a relationship with Adobe, but having the opportunity to connect with so many people.
Let me see, where do I start? I mean, it's been a great ride so far. I'm really excited to see the photo album that comes of the Life Reflected campaign, people who have submitted work through the hashtags. And then, throughout those different themes, it should really excited to see that. But what's your question again? I feel like my mind kind of went.
Let me go back to it. Why don't you explain in a little more detail what the Life Reflective project is,
Yeah.
so people who may not be familiar with it can get an understanding.
Okay, no problem. So it's basically a campaign to create a global international photo album that looks at daily life, that looks at the human experience and how we have documented that through photographs, and not necessarily work through, studio work or professional work, but what have we recorded in our daily lives on our phones, on our cameras, put in our archives, that sometimes we may forget about. But there's the time, I feel like now is the time to really look at how we are connected as human beings. We all are experiencing love, friendship, growth, joy, adventure, all of these things. So that's what basically the campaign is about, is to create this photo album based on all of these things that we have experienced in life. And it's been really wonderful. Another photographer who's a friend of mine, Andre Wagner, he's also on the campaign and has been sharing the hashtags with everyone. And so, it's really been fun, and I'm grateful for it too, because as we know, the last 3 weeks have been pretty serious and heavy with the trial and everything like that. And then, things are still not over, but it was a really good opportunity to connect with folks, and to share and to really center the human experience, that we often forget. We are all having a human experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And tell me about the experience about collaborating with Adobe, because it's a large business, and it's a big name, especially in the photographic community, but it's also a rare kind of opportunity in which you have to sort of dialogue in which you're not just getting hired to do something. You are a collaborator in this thing. Your
Yeah.
ideas and your thoughts and your feelings about these things they're being honored, which is not something that we often get with a big company. And I'd love for you to sort of talk about what that experience has been like for you and Andre.
Okay. Well, this is really my first kind of influencer experience because as you know, I'm mostly a documentary and photojournalist. So it was a nice kind of expansion on what I do. The experience with Adobe has been very positive, very exciting. I was really excited when they reached out to me with this project. They answered all of my questions. The team that I work with were open to some of my thoughts and suggestions and my timeline, and really respected my timeline because I was working on what I was working on. And so it was really great. And I hope that, and I wish that, all of the experiences are with, big companies like Adobe are as positive as the one that I have experienced with them, And I think that this project that really centers life and life experiences, I really think that this project it just makes people feel included. Everyone can participate. It isn't something that you need to have some type of technical knowledge about, or you need to be like a master pro at Photoshop. You're basically participating and engaging with, the work that you've already created. And you can be in dialogue and conversation with other photographers through these hashtags. Some of the hashtags were inspiration reflected, childhood reflected, home reflected, joy reflected, friendship reflected. These are all things that we engage in. These are life experiences. And so I think it was pretty smart for Adobe to kind of just engage the everyday, regular experience of living life.
That's great. I look forward to seeing the final results for this.
Yeah, me too. I look forward to it. It should be coming soon.
So my last question is a question I ask each guest. I ask them to recommend another photographer for our listeners to discover and explore, and it can be anyone, someone you've long admired or someone you've recently discovered. So who would that one photographer be and why?
What a tough question. Okay, just give me 1 second.
It's okay. A lot of people have taken that second.
I guess I was thinking about her earlier because I really want to photograph her. I'm doing a book on Black photographers. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about her earlier. And her name is Liz Johnson Otter. She's based in the UK. She's Ghanaian and Russian. Mm. Yeah. She's been in this game for a while, since the 80s. I consider her an unsung hero. But she's probably sung, But I was thinking about her because she did some photographs recently she photographed someone for a magazine. I'm so sorry, I forget. But I was like, man, if I could make my way over to the UK, I would really like to sit with her and photograph her. She had a big show at the Brooklyn Museum a few years back, and we did sit and talk, which was wonderful and great. And I saw her again in Mali in 2019 at the Bamako Biennale, which me and Delphine curated a small show for, and she was there. She had her work exhibited there as well. So we kicked it for a little bit. But I think that folks should check out Liz Johnson Otter. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that sounds like a plan. That sounds good. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time and your generosity. I loved having the chance to talk to you.
This was great. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And thank you all for listening. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
We're pleased to announce LensRentals.com as a sponsor of the show. They are a great fit because they understand and support the work that we do, and they provide a service that's valuable to listeners like you. Because there are times when you want or you need to use a particular piece of equipment for an assignment or a project or a once-in-a-lifetime vacation, but your pockets only go so deep, and so you do without. But with LensRentals.com, you are provided an affordable option for using that special lens or camera for a weekend, a week, or longer at a reasonable and a fair price. It's also a great way to use something before you commit to buying it. And if you're like me and you worry about something bad happening while using someone else's gear, they offer 2 different levels of insurance so that your rental is protected against damage, theft, and even a bear attack. So use it worry-free. Check out their extensive inventory and save 10% on your first order when you sign up for their newsletter at lensrentals.com/newsletter. And thanks to those who financially support The Candid Frame. Your belief in what we do means the world to us and has helped us grow in so many ways. I can't thank you enough. If you haven't already, please contribute to our work by becoming a Patreon supporter today. You can do that by contributing $5, $10, $20 or more a month by visiting patreon.com/The Candid Frame. Just $5 a month makes a big difference. Thank you for your kindness and support. Thanks to Laylah for joining us. Find out more about her and her work by visiting laylahbarrayn.format.com. Your thoughts and feelings about the show matter. So if you haven't already, please write a review on Apple Podcast or whatever service you listen to podcasts. It helps us to stand out among the many thousands of podcasts that are out there. Your voice makes a difference. And remember, you can support the show by contributing to our Patreon effort or make a one-time or recurring donation via PayPal. Thanks to Kenneth Durecki and Blue Tango Projects for their recent contributions. I'm also going to be leading my Using Your Life to Launch Your Photography online workshop this summer. Find out more by clicking on the link on the website in the show notes or visit nobechicreative.com. We also provide a series of ebooks on photography available for purchase on our website. It's my way of sharing my experience and knowledge and another way for you to support the show. And if you can't find every episode of the show on whatever service you listen to podcasts, download the Candid Frame app, which is available for free on both Apple iOS and Android. The Candid Frame's audio engineer is Martin Taylor, who you can find at theothermartintaylor.com. The show's senior producer is Cynthia Parker, and our music is from Kevin MacLeod, whose royalty-free music can be found at incompetech.com. And this is Ibarian X, and this is The Candid Frame.